Hello, the following video you're about to watch is an extract from my new course and book, Atomic Note-Taking. So enjoy the video, and if you want to check out more about the course, go to atomicnotetaking.com. Let's now talk about creating fleeting notes from an article. So what I want to cover here is give you an example of how I approach creating these notes when reading online articles. And this came about from my observation where I was with a group of friends and we shared an article, and I made some notes on the article and a friend made some notes on the same article. And when he saw the notes that I had made, he said, "How is it that you've managed to create so few notes from this article? When I read it, everything feels new and important and I'm capturing almost everything." And that's what made me realize that as you start doing this, it's really hard to know what to filter out and what to keep. And I find that when you've been reading an awful lot about a subject, it gets a lot easier to know how to just pull on the key points that are different rather than a new subject where everything seems novel and you're capturing everything. So to help you with this process, I wanted to share what it was like. I want to share what my approach is when going through an article, and hopefully it'll give you a frame of reference to see where that is different to your approach. So I've taken an article from my own blog, and I've done that for copyright reasons. I don't want to put anyone else's work straight in here, but I've used it as a way to show the kinds of things I would highlight and then what annotations I would put with that. And you'll notice the different kind of annotations and the different things I look for when highlighting. So this article is called "Why I Get Motivated But Never Do Anything," and it talks about the concept of motioning, which makes you feel like you're making progress by being in motion, but you actually don't do anything of any substance that moves you towards your goals. And I wrote this article at a time where I discovered this technique, but it sort of aligned with some of my own experiences where I had aspirations to do things. I felt like I was doing something, but then it just dissipated. But also other people where they say, "Oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that," and they never take any actions, any meaningful actions that show that they're serious about it. So I'm going to go through this, and I'm just going to pull out the kinds of things I'm highlighting and what I would annotate. So we start with the introduction where it says, "Get motivated by a new goal, but then take no steps to do it." So this is referring to when people get motivated, but they don't take any steps. And I've highlighted that to emphasize that this is the key problem that this article is talking to. So now I can recognize who this article is for and why they should see themselves or someone they know as needing to hear this advice. So it's really about emphasizing the key problem for that. Then we go on to questions like, are we just being hard on ourselves? And this jumped out at me because I made a comment saying, well, is this true? Are we being hard on ourselves? And if so, what does that look like? So I'm seeing a statement that common sense says, would that make sense? But I'm doing a bit of critical thinking and say, well, actually, is that true? Is this really what is going on? Is this more of an interpretation, an opinion, separating opinions from facts? And bearing in mind, I wrote the article, so I'm being critical on my own writing here. And I've also put the question, well, how do we know? What does it look like if it is indeed true? And then we say, like, or do we lack the confidence to accept the failures? And I've added a comment here: being able to accept and confront our failures without affecting our confidence or self-esteem is a critical trait to have, to having the courage to take action. So I'm adding my own insight here. I've taken that point and I'm now sort of going deeper in my own annotations because I've got a mental model and I've got my own other research that has helped me understand this. So this is another example where I would take something I'm agreeing and I'm adding more detail to what the original author would have put. And then we say things like, motioning or to be in motion rather than in action. I've just highlighted that as a key theme of this material. And then your motivation peaks when you get excited, so you turn to social media to announce your newfound passion and goal to write a book. And I put a highlight here, emphasizing that it's a way to visualize the traits that someone has when they're exhibiting motion. So what's going through my mind here is, if I was to tell someone else this in a story, maybe I'm going to create a YouTube video, what visuals would I use to articulate it? What story narrative would I do? And the idea that someone says, I'm going to write a book. So you say, hey, good news, everyone, I'm writing a book. And you sort of create this momentum, but you actually don't do the thing. You don't write the book. We have things like, you slip right into your previous routine. And I've added a comment here. This happens all too often. We have the ambition to make a change, but we fail to set a new habit or routine to make the change happen. How can we focus on new habits when we have motivation? So what I'm doing here is I'm actually asking a question now that can yield further research. Say, okay, so if people slip into their old habits, but when you're motivated, rather than trying to do everything in one fell swoop in that motivation kind of high, what if the motivation yielded action in creating routines and habits? What does that look like? So I'm priming myself for new research, new content that I can consume that can help narrow myself into that answer. Things like, you feel a sense of guilt. So when you're experiencing it, highlight this is capturing the emotions. That's signal motioning. So now how could you be self-aware that maybe you're in that situation? I feel guilty. I've said I'm going to do this thing. I'm not doing it. We often act hastily. So this adds context to what actions potentially lead to failure. We're ill-equipped to turn that motivation into habit. So this is introducing the habits play a role. So you can kind of see, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but you can see how this forms. Comments can be, okay, I've got a key solution point here. So to avoid extrinsic rewards, and it goes into that. So those solution points, these are the core themes and actions out of the article. I've got my own comments. I've got questions to dig deeper. And it's a mixture of that. So you can see how I'm thinking more deeply. I'm not just highlighting and recreating the work. I'm questioning it. I'm correlating it to my own understanding and trying to really get under the surface. How can I take this piece of work and go deeper with it? How can I extend it? How can I take it to the next stage of this subject? So by all means, go through the PDF and familiarize yourself with these examples here. And then once you've finished, what I can then do is take that work and then just write it up into bullet points, so using the outline method. And now I have my fleeting notes on that subject. So I can take those questions, I can sort of rephrase them, organize them. And I've got things like motioning is to be in motion but not taking action. What are the triggers? What are the consequences? What are the solutions? So I'm restructuring what came out of that article. How do you remove friction and how do you be committed, right? And then that now can then be the basis of taking that through to my literature notes, where I can think more deeply, I can relate the concepts together, I can provide examples for each point, organize it where it's one atomic idea per note, and I've got a nice body of work all about the idea of motioning. And then later that would go into my permanent notes, where then I would consider other aspects. How does it relate to fixed and growth mindset? How does it relate to habits, from reading Atomic Habits, for example, and bringing it all together in one bigger body of knowledge.